The Mixed Ecology is about learning to do mission and church in different ways and mutually beneficial forms. And in order for that to happen, we need to learn from one another, to learn from different approaches and different experiences of church and mission. In this conversation, we're going to be thinking about the how of the Mixed Ecology. How is it happening and working well in the context that we find ourselves within? So, hi everybody, it's really good to be here. My name is Will Folger, and I am Director of the Centre for Church Planting, Theology and Research based at Cranmer Hall in Durham. And we've been doing some research with churches and with dioceses and organisations. And the question we're asking is that how question. How do we do this well as one church? How do we do the Mixed Ecology well as one church? It'd be great to just hear from you who you are and a little bit about your context. Why don't we start with you, Helen?
So I'm Helen Shannon. I'm an associate minister at St Barnabas Church in Finchley, big resource church, but I also lead a church plant on an estate called Church at Five.
And I'm Linda Maslin. I lead Fountains Church Bradford, which is a resource church. And as well as kind of standard congregation, we've got congregational plants and also some network churches.
I'm Phil Hoyle. I'm the Pioneer Enabler based at the Gregory Centre for Church Multiplication and part of the Creative Growth team for London Diocese.
I'm Dave Lloyd and I work up in Norwich Diocese. I lead the Garden Network, a network of missional communities in and around Norfolk. I'm also non-stipendiary at St Thomas's, which is the resource church in the city centre. And I work for the diocese part-time in church planting and revitalisation.
Fantastic. So my first question, you've shared a little bit there about your context, but we'd love to know more. Why don't you share how the Mixed Ecology is working itself out in the places that you find yourself?
I think for us it kind of evolved out of the back end of COVID. So Fountains is just coming up to 4 years old, and of course 2 of those were in COVID land. And when we'd originally set out our strategy as a city centre resource church, our plan was to do the normal kind of replication, so to plant another church. But the nature of what happened around COVID meant that we couldn't easily do that as a new church. So we found that we began to plant congregational plants. So those congregational plants are different congregations meeting still in the same building but at different times. And then alongside that, the diocese found that there were quite a number of clergy who retired in a way that we weren't really expecting them to. And so we helped in terms of starting to think about how do we do, not really a revitalisation because the churches were already relatively strong but had lost kind of missional heart. And so that kind of evolved for us. So the Mixed Ecology for us as Fountains kind of grew out of the context that we found ourselves in.
So being associate minister at St Barnabas, I was there a long time before we planted a church. And so it's a big resource church in North London, but we moved 15 years ago onto an estate that is in a deprived area. And 13 years ago, we planted a church there. We spent 2.5 years really deciding what we were going to do. Were we going to, because it's really relatively close, were we going to kind of ship them back up to St Barnabas? But I think we soon realised that physically we could do that, but the cultural distance was really too big for that. And we did another short hop church plant from our estate onto another estate, which really got killed off by COVID. And so we're just about to go again on that estate and do another church plant from our church plant. But it will be different. It won't be based on a Sunday. It'll be based midweek and it'll be around families.
Well, up in Norfolk, we have 658 church buildings. I don't have 658 church buildings, but the diocese does. And it's the highest concentration of medieval church buildings in the world, apparently. So there's not a shortage of buildings, but it's a really interesting place to be exploring the mixed ecology. The picture I have is, you know, that the game you play as a kid where you're trying to not, you're jumping on paving slabs and you're not allowed to tread on the lines. It's actually the kind of reverse of that, in that there are these big paving slabs and all you can do or really want to do is plant in the gaps on the lines. So we have missional communities that don't ask for money, so they're zero cost. They don't have buildings, so there's no buildings issues. They don't do anything on a Sunday. So they are trying to just work in the spaces and complement what's already there and what's already causing quite a lot of strain, I think, on the infrastructure of running Sunday and keeping things open or happening. So a lot of it depends on relationship, a lot of it depends on a bit of diplomacy and understanding and patience, but seeing what emerges out of a few kind of local heroes who go looking for something different and then something happens around it. We have about 17 or 18 active or emerging communities in various parishes, and and seen some really great fruit come from it, and something really fresh, and it's helping, I like to think it's helping to change the culture as well around what church is, and just slowly kind of open people's hearts and minds to something different, not being a threat, not being a problem, and getting away from a dualism of, this or that, or contemporary or traditional, or young or old, or whatever it might be. So the language of ecology is really helpful.
Yeah, I resonate with that in London as well. I think what we're seeing is we have kind of a grassroots that is springing up, doing lots of different stuff, and at the same time the diocese is kind of embracing that with this target of 400 new worshipping communities by 2030. And those two things kind of meet together, where we're finding more and more parishes, perhaps post-COVID, as you both mentioned, but prior to that as well, kind of wanting to engage more with the people that they know in their parish, but who aren't engaging with Sunday church or congregational church. And so we're seeing a lot of different communities springing up, and very contextual communities as well. So a pioneer community out in Willesden to the west looks very different to one that's springing up in Stepney in the east. So yeah, we're seeing a lot of things springing up, and I think partially that is because of the target set by the diocese, but also I think the target set is in response to the grassroots stuff that's been going on as well.
This language of ecology is rich language, and you've talked about diversity. I mean, this is God's church, isn't it? It's God's diversity, and it's so exciting to recognise that even in this limited conversation that already we're seeing some of that diversity. So I guess my follow-up question is, what are some of the challenges you faced in having those conversations, those diverse conversations within the context that you're in?
I think there was a big challenge coming out of the pandemic into engaging parishes with doing something new. I think a lot of church leadership teams reported that they were quite tired. That's probably an understatement. They were shattered after COVID, and so we're struggling to get on board with the idea that they were going to do something new. And also I think seeing people leave their congregations that had been there prior, and just the dynamic of how people interact with each other change. So I think since lockdowns have ended, it's been a process of re-engaging with churches.
I think one of the challenges that we've faced has been that there's been the acceptance that the other worshipping communities are just as much a part of Fountains as the more regular 4:30 congregation is. So people have kind of got stuck on, this is the way that we do church, and because church looks different in the worshipping communities, then that becomes a more difficult thing for people to accept. So there's had to be quite a bit of education around actually what is church and what does that look like in this new kind of economy.
I think for us, being part of a big resource church, which we're still part of, I'm still the associate minister there. We are more than a congregation. We have our own BMO because we're not within Bishop's Mission Order, because we're not within their parish. But actually, it's about keeping that relationship and not striving for independence, rather wanting to be interdependent on one another, and that goes against the grain in some ways. With COVID, everybody kind of pulled back and drew in, and it seemed like our forgotten places became forgotten again. And so it has been saying, no, we're still out here and God's still at work, and how do we then re-engage with those places? And I think one of the other things with working with a resource church as well is letting things naturally grow. I think we have grown up as a church at Five has, we were a very kind of a baby church. We were so dependent on our mother church right at the beginning. And then, then we became quite a stroppy teenagery church in some ways. Yeah, we could do it on our own, and they needed to let go a bit. And I think almost now we're a bit like the kid who's gone to uni. Bless them, they really financially support us. We wouldn't survive without them, but we are self-led and we get on with our own stuff, and our vision is our own. And but I guess they're there hoping and praying that the values that were sown in, are still there. But we have that independence, but we're still family.
I just think it's lovely to hear that about the sense that this can't be forced, but it's a journey, it's a process. There's a sort of development that happens as we have these different forms. It can't be done overnight, and there's a sort of maturing process. I thought the way you articulated that was really, really helpful.